purpose-based classification of delegated legislation are six types. So the first one, that is regarding power to bring the act into operation. So often the act empowers the government to appoint a day for the act to come into force, and in that connection we could cite the example of Citizenship Amendment Act of 2009 as it was enacted in December 2019, but it came into operation in April 2024. As under the act, the very delegation was made to the executive, that is the central government, to bring the act into operation. And the second one, that is relating to power to extend the very scope of the act, and regarding that we will discuss the Minimum Wages Act 1952. So the power to extend the scope of the act in this type of delegation, the act in the first instance is made applicable to limited territories or persons or commodities, etc. And the executive is empowered to extend its application to other territories or persons or commodities, as for example, the provision of Section 27 of Minimum Wages Act of 1952, which empowered the government or the executive to extend the very scope of the act into other persons or territories or objects. And the third one, that is power to exclude persons or objects, and in connection to that we will discuss Payment of Bonus Act 1965 and Madras Cooperative Societies Act 1932. So the power to make exclude persons or objects, etc., from the operation of the act, which authorize the government to execute to exempt certain persons, objects, etc., from their operation. For example, the Payment of Bonus Act 1965 empowers the government to exempt any establishment from its operation having regard to the financial position and other relevant circumstances. It has been held to be valid. So also, Section 60 of the Madras Cooperative Societies Act 1932 empowers the state government to exempt any registered society from any of the provisions of this act or apply it to any society with such modification as may be specified by it. And the fourth one, that is regarding the power to modify the act or the statute, and in that connection we could say about the Delhi Laws Act, which was enacted in 1950. So sometimes the act or statute making the delegation of legislative power authorizes the executive to modify the act or statute itself. sometimes it becomes necessary to enable the executive to meet the changing circumstances. Consequently, with delegation often held valid if there is no change in the legislative policy of the act or the statute. And now we'll go to the fifth one, that is the power to remove difficulty. And in that connection, we'll discuss two important leading cases. One is Gammon India Limited versus Union of India in 1974, and the Jalan Trading Company versus Mil Mazur Shava 1967. So, in that connection, we could discuss usually the delegation of power to remove difficulties is held valid if it is required to be exercised consistent with the provisions of enabling act or parent act without changing the essential provisions thereof, as it was decided in the Delhi Laws Act sole show under Gammon India Limited versus Union of India. And regarding the Jalan Trading Company versus Mil Mazdur Shawar 1967, Section 37 of Payment of Bonus Act was challenged. According to this section, any difficulty government may by order published in the official gazette make such provision not inconsistent with the purpose of this act as necessary or expedient for the removal of the difficulty or doubt, and order the central government in such cases shall be final. And now we'll go to the sixth one, that is relating to power to make rules. As in that case, we can discuss the General Clauses Control Act 1947, then Securities Capital Issues Control Act 1947, and the Securities Contracts Regulation Act 1956. So, the Enabling or Parent Act authorizes the delegate to make rules, etc., to carry out the very purpose of the act, and such delegation is valid. As for example, Section 12 of the Capital Issue Control Act 1947, so also Section 30 of Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956 empower the central government to make rules for carrying into effect the very object of the act.